we go. We've got that fixed. Hello and good evening. Welcome to Live with Gotham Quilts. I am Allison, and you're watching us on a Tuesday or maybe a different day, but today is Tuesday for us. It's not very often, but we have a live studio audience here, so you might hear some background noise, but not to worry. We're still having fun in the shop here today. We've got a fabulous show. It's such a big show. We're talking big things today that I had to stand up. Normally I'm sitting, but I have to stand up so that you can see most of this beautiful quilt behind me. And this is going to be the centerpiece of it all. This is a pattern called Echo, and you can see it's a little bit of a play on a log cabin, and it's made with these beautiful batiks. So we're going to talk all about this particular pattern, this particular kit. We're going to talk about this gorgeous line of batiks. When you see these fabrics up close, you are just going to start drooling. So you might want to get a hanky or a tissue right now. But most importantly, we are going to show you all of the hard-won things that we've learned about sewing big, long seams. And this is going to apply to both the quilt that I have behind me. We've got the largest because it's a pretty big size quilt. It's 72 inches square. You've got long seams that stretch the entire span of the quilt, so 72 inches. So this is going to apply to those big, long blocks. It's going to apply to when you are putting on sashing and you've got a whole marathon to sew through. But it's also going to apply to those jelly roll quilts. If you have like a jelly roll race or any of those things where you're using strip piecing and big long strips to maybe save a little bit of heartburn, make it a little bit easier to sew what you're looking to sew. We're going to talk about some amazing tips and tricks to help you with those. But first, I gave you the intro. First, let's talk about this fabric. So this is the Stone Strata line. It's a design by Kathy Engel, and this is out of Island Batiks. And if you are thinking of batiks, there's a number of really great manufacturers out there. I would say that Island Batiks is one of the top ones. And when we get into the fabric, I'll show you a little bit more about that. But here is the line at a glance. It's beautiful golds and blues and kind of into a little bit of the teal to give it some texture. And actually, you know what? Let's just get into the fabric. I can't tease it anymore. A couple of the things that I wanted to tell you about as far as Island Batiks goes is the quality of their chops. Now, if you don't know, chop, TJAP, I believe is how it is. It's pronounced kind of like your chop. Your chops, I guess. Island Batik has a really good quality of their chops, which means the imprint. So if you are not familiar with batiks, they are made using a wax resist method. There are these big copper chops that are dipped in wax and then pressed on the fabric, and so there's wax covering portions of the fabric. Then that fabric is dyed, and wherever the wax covers, it either isn't dyed or it leaves the fabric below. So one of the previous dyes, you can see that through. So here you can see this is a chop of like a seashell kind of a shape. You'll notice in this particular batik line, they're all very, you'll get it from the name Stone Strata. They're all very kind of fossil feeling. There's a couple that really show up well with that. But one of the things I love about Island Batiks is that their chops are always very well imprinted on the fabric. And so you can see very beautifully what that design is intended to be. And it really does add to the feel, the loveliness of the fabric. And when I say feel, I mean more like a vibe, not necessarily texture. But while we're talking on texture, batiks do have a great texture. Because they go through this dyeing and washing and out in the sun process, they're a little bit more substantial than your typical quilting cotton. They have, they're a tighter thread count to begin, a tighter weave to begin with, but then they also have all of that washing and waxing. It tightens up that, so you get a really nice hand to it. You get some really nice body to this. So I'm just going to quickly go through the fabrics in this particular line. There are 20 fabrics in this line, which is a really good collection. And you could see from that you run the gamut from the blues and the golds. If you are interested in shopping this at your own leisure or a little closer up, I've got a QR code in the bottom there. Go ahead and scan that QR code, or if you are on a mobile device, for example, you can always take a screenshot, then go into your pictures and just click on that QR code there. It's a fun, easy way to get to that. Now, this one let's see here. Do I have something white? We'll put this in the corner here. Sometimes the camera has some trouble balancing the color. And so I'm just going to put this little white card here so that the camera knows how to read this. But this one, you could see as I did that, it balanced to a much more accurate color that I'm seeing in person here. This is a nice honey gold, just a really lovely color. And so you look at all of these chops. And that's how you know what is a good batik, is when you have something small and delicate and intricate like that, can you still see the design? Can you still see the detail behind it? And with Island Batiks, you know you always can. So like I said, there are 20 fabrics in this collection, and this is one of those gorgeous blues. This one kind of reminds me of like an octopus arm. And if you guys are still around at the end, I will tell you my conspiracy theory about octopus. So let me know if you want to hear that in the comments. But I don't think it's a widely held belief, but I feel very passionate about it. So look at that gorgeous blue. And as I'm looking at my camera here, it's showing up beautifully. It looks just as beautiful in person, that vibrant, gorgeous blue. And that's the other nice thing about batiks, is because it's a dye process, you can dye it as many times as you want. So you get a real depth of color in that, which gives you a depth of texture. So we've got those spirals, kind of those octopus spirals again. And this one actually probably does look a little bit more like octopus tentacles swirling around here, but it's just a lovely, nice abstract color. So this is where that teal comes in. You've got the blue dyes mixing with that golden yellow. Isn't this beautiful? These batiks are one of my favorite. This line, we absolutely fell in love with the moment that we saw it. We knew we had to do something great with it. So I'm going to scooch this around so hopefully we can get some balancing here. This one, as I'm looking at it here, looks just a little more dull than it does in person. There we go. There it balanced. A brighter color here. And now we're getting into kind of those firm palm leaves. And if you think about it, there's a lot of interest in this. Maybe I'm just seeing octopus everywhere, but this kind of looks like the underside of an octopus arm too. Maybe they should have called it Sandra, can't wait to hear about my conspiracy theory on octopi or octopodes. I did watch I hesitate to call it a documentary, but there was it was very hotly debated if it's octopus, a plural of octopus, I guess. And I don't think it's octopode, but that's my favorite one. So I just have octopus on the brain, I guess, with the suction cups. Yep, absolutely, John. So it is just a lovely, fabulous collection. Even sometimes we'll see batiks that have kind of an interesting, or I would say a very creative chop to it. This one I love because it's perfect. It was really thought out well for quilters, because sure, if you look very closely, you could see an octopus or a shell, but it's not so obvious. It's not like a dancing bear with a soccer ball or something like that. It's not so specific as to be distracting. And so here we're just kind of cycling through these fabulous colors and these fabulous chops. This one I don't think we have seen before. It's just kind of a nice general wavy one. This would also make a good wood grain finish if you're making like an outdoors or like Yeah, we'll call it an outdoor quilt. And then here we have that gorgeous swirl. You can see the chop a little bit better, that texture a little bit better. It was the same as this one. This one's just a little more subtle, I would say. But if you want to get a better look at that design, it's on this one. Such a fabulous one. And here we are back to those tentacle-like things. And just look at how abstract that kind of looks here. So batiks are really fabulous. If you've never worked with them before, we kind of like them in the shop because we can get right to sewing. There's not a whole big need to do a lot of starching or sizing, and they are really easy and fun to work with. And as I talk a little bit later in the show about tips and tricks when you are sewing big long seams, batiks really kind of help hedge your bet on that, because a lot of the things that cause regular quilting cotton to bow or like rainbow or wave out when you have big long seams, you don't necessarily have that with batiks, or it's just a little bit easier to control for. And here's that 20th fabric, a nice alabaster-y color with just a little bit of that kind of almost mossy green in there that just gives it a whole lot of lovely texture. And then, of course, with this, we do have our pre-cuts. This one is going to be the apple peel. If you're not familiar, the apple peel, the big apple peel in this case, is going to be 6 inches by width of fabric. And of course, we give you a little bit extra so that when you're cutting it down, you do get 6 inches. But this is going to be the full collection. So 1 strip each of every single fabric that we just looked at there. And then, of course, we've got the OG of the pre-cuts. We've got the fat quarter bundle there too. So what a gorgeous, fabulous line. Now, we showed you the fabric. We showed you one thing you could do with it. And actually, I will, before I go too far, I will remember to get that QR code up there. If you are interested in the kit, we've got this. It's a self-contained kit. You get the fabric for the top, the binding, and the pattern is all included in that one place. You can either scan that QR code or, like I say, take a screenshot if you're on mobile, go into your photos and just click on that image and it'll bring you right to the website, or Google it. Or I guess not Google it, but go to our website and search for it, I guess is the general term for searching for things. Either by Stone Strata or Echo is the pattern. If you're looking for just the pattern, we've got that available for you too, if you've got your own fabric that you'd like to use for this fabulous one. So now that I got you interested in this kit, let's talk a little bit about sewing long seams. And I'm going to scooch these guys out of the way and we're going to go back to the overhead. But I'm going to show you some tips and tricks. Let's go to this overhead. There's not a whole lot to look at here. We'll make that go away. Perfect. Okay, so let's talk about tips and tricks when you are sewing big long seams. And first, I've got all my pieces ready to go here. First, we're going to talk about setting yourself up for success. Now, like I said before, this is going to apply to any kind of long seam that you're doing. You're making a jelly roll quilt. You're sewing the entire width of fabric together. This is going to help you out. You're sewing your rows together, or in the case of the quilt behind me, if you are sewing big blocks together to make a 72-inch quilt, you're going to be golden. So let's pretend for a second that this was my width of fabric and I'm pinning these two pieces together. I'm going to sew my seam. Now, generally, and you'll have to let me know if you are team pin or team not so much. I'm definitely team not so much, except for when it comes to this. The first thing that you're going to want to do to set yourself up for success is avoid the urge to leave your fabric long and then cut it down to the size that you want. Especially if you are sewing on, for example, sashing or borders. That's a really That's a really easy trap to get caught up into. But what happens is when you are sewing, sometimes your top stretches at a different rate than your bottom. And so you'll have your top fabric stretched out, your bottom fabric will stay normal, and then you'll add an extra, maybe even as much of an inch to the top fabric, which means that you are going to get a wavy seam, you're going to get a bowed seam, it's not going to lay flat. So it's so much better if you start with the size fabric that you need. So in this case, let's just pretend I have my little scrap fabrics cut to the length that I needed here. This is where I'm going to pin. And you're going to pin in a couple of different places as much as you need. So get them lined up and looking good. And you're going to pin at the end. And again, remember, this is your entire width of fabric here. So I got my two ends pinned. And of course, if I were actually sewing this, I would spend a little bit more time to make sure that they were actually lined up. But this is just for demonstration here. And then what I'm going to do is pin in the middle. My two pins, I'm going to split the difference. So if this was an entire 45-inch width of fabric, I'm going to pin it about 21, 22, somewhere in there. And then I've got that pinned together. Then what I do is split the difference between each pin. So I've got my pin in the middle and my pin at the end. I'm just going to pin it right in the middle to get this piece here. And I'm going to pin it right in the middle to get this piece here. And I'm going to do that until I feel comfortable. This is probably about as many pins as I would want to do. If you want to split the difference a couple more times, do whatever is comfortable to you. But if you do that, put your pins in and split the difference, and then split the difference. You are bound to have, if you are off a little bit, if some stretches a little bit more than the others, you've only got so far before it's going to stop you and reset, and then you'll get right back on track with that. So that's one piece of advice for pinning is you want to make sure you pin and make sure that your fabric is the size that you want it to. So that way you're not going to go any farther than that. Another piece of advice is to lower your stitch length. I've got a couple of examples here. Those are my good examples. And, oh no, okay. So in this example, I've got, maybe you can see, maybe not so much. I've got a teeny tiny stitch length. So this might be what I would use if I were sewing like small pieces together. This was, I think, a 1.5 or a 1.8, something like that. So it definitely has its place. But what you can see is when I sewed this strip together, and I hope we've got enough distance on the camera here where you can see, when you lay it out, you can see that my seam is a little bowed. The smaller stitch length puts some extra tension on this fabric. And so basically it looks like a rainbow. And you're kind of seeing the arch of the rainbow right here. If you line it up against these lines, so my lines here are straight, you can see that my strip set here is not. It goes all the way to this line here, and then we're off by, gosh, maybe about 1/4 of an inch in the middle, and then back down here. A lot of things to blame. In this case, a teeny tiny stitch length was one of them. So shorten up your stitch length. I'm going to swap that out with a much better version here. And so here I've got a much larger one. This one is about, I think it was like a 2.5 or a 2.8, something like that. After you sew with your longer stitch length, here's another tip for you. And that is to press. Now, I know you all know how to press. I know that I know how to press. Even though I know how to press, sometimes it's hard to not get in the habit of kind of swishing and smushing. For your long seams, avoid the urge to swish and smush. For this, you will set your seam. So let's pretend my iron was on for a second, but I promise you, being on a cutting mat, it is not. This is just for demonstration. So before I even do anything, I'm going to press, which means lift up, put down, move to the next space. I'm going to press my seam just to set that. Then what I'm going to do is take a little bit of care and open up my seam. It really does help if you take your fingers and press that open. And when I say open, I mean like, the you're opening up this, not necessarily that your seam allowance is open. You definitely can do that. I know people have very, very strong feelings on that. I got big feelings on that one too. But I'm going to open it with my fingers as opposed to taking my iron and smushing it. The reason being is because I can feel a little bit better with my fingers if I've made it all the way to that seam allowance than I can with my iron. I'm just kind of like a hope and a pray on this one if I'm using my iron to open that up. So I'll use my fingers to finger press it. I will be careful not to stretch it, but I do want to be, firm. I want to be firm with that. After I get this open, that's when I'm going to take my trusty iron and I'm going to press. Now, if you are going to smush anyway, smush it open. Don't smush it this way because you are just asking to get that lengthened out and to get your long seams bowed. So I'm going to press. It's hard not to smush. It's so much fun to smush, but I'm going to do my best not to. But since I've opened that up with my fingers and I can feel that I'm all the way up to my seam allowance, I'm feeling pretty good about that. Now, if you wanted to at this point, you definitely could press your seams open. A lot of people swear by it. I personally am not a huge fan of it, but I would still recommend pressing with your fingers first so you can see to make sure that you're getting all of that fabric up to your seam allowance. That's another great way to get a bowed or a rainbowed, kind of a banana looking long seam, is if you kind of lose some effort in the middle and you lose a little bit of that seam allowance, your fabric will be just a little bit shorter there. So press, don't smush, open with your fingers first, because we can all feel a little bit better. Another thing I'll point out while we're talking about pressing is these guys. These guys were great examples. We did everything right here. We lengthened our stitch length a little bit. We pressed open with our fingers. The only difference between these two guys, and I can tell you, you can probably hardly tell the difference. The only difference is with this one, we used a clapper, and with this one, we didn't. Now, this is not necessarily unique to long strips of fabric. This is a good practice no matter what, is find whatever pressing method you like the best. And while we're talking about pressing, this one, okay, before I say anything, if you can chat in the comments, are you team steam or team dry iron? I'm going to move on and then I'm going to come back to the other piece of hard-won advice that we've learned on working on long seams. So let me know, are you team steam or team dry iron? Okay, so with this one, the only difference is we used a clapper on one, but not the other. They both turned out fabulous. And it looks like these two blue fabrics, they do look kind of cute together. Yeah, it's a beautiful collection. Okay, now, if you are team steam, for this, try dry iron first. Steam is very helpful in getting things nice and flat and beautiful. But while you're in process of making your blocks, just give a dry iron a chance. If you need a little bit of extra help, the clapper is great. Pressing treatment is great too. But steam can warp your fabric. Getting it wet and then dry again, it could give you a little bit of a bow. So here's what I might recommend is while you're in the process of sewing your quilt together, of sewing these blocks together, do your dry iron. And then when you are ready for your final pressing, when you are ready to get it nice and super flat, that's when you introduce the steam. Because by then, all of your seams are set, all of your blocks are together. It's really just about flattening at that point. So, oh, Barbara loves to seam, but has learned not to. Oh, I'm not gonna lie, that kind of breaks my heart a little bit. That the love of steam, or probably not the love of steam, but the actual act of steaming has been ripped from your heart. But yeah, it looks like a lot of team dry iron in the chats here. So save it for the end. There is a place for it, but yeah, save it for the end. Okay, now if you are a fan of strip piecing, and if you're not familiar with strip piecing, what it is basically if you've got a lot of blocks that are together. Let's say I have a lot of blocks that are these two fabrics together. What I would consider doing is, especially if they're the same size, actually pretty much exclusively if they're the same size, I would sew my strip together. I would subcut this, and now instead of sewing, 45 2.5-inch blocks together, I sew 2.5-inch strips together and then cut them down to 2.5. And so that way it just saves a lot of time, a lot of heartburn, and it just works so much quicker. So especially if you are sewing strip sets together, it's really important to be super even and super precise all the way through. Otherwise, you're going to end up with subcut blocks that are a different length. Now, this also works the same for jelly roll quilts, for example, for anything where you are sewing lots of long strips together. Now, with this one, I'm going to keep this one down at the bottom, but we're going to look at the top one for a second. Now, it is not your camera playing tricks on you, or it's not your device playing tricks on you. This one, we did have some problems. So you can see there's a little bow here. There's a little bow here. I feel like I want to say little bo peep. That feels like the next logical sentence. But in each one of these, we had a little bit of problem. And you can see that there are some skinny spots and there are some long spots. Do you want to know what we did with that one? We sewed our 5 strips together and then we pressed it all at one time. That's the only thing that we did wrong with this one. And you can see just pressing it all together, we didn't get as nice results as we did with this one down at the bottom. And that one just kind of puffed up a little bit. So resist the urge to sew all of your strips and then press. You'll get lesser results than if you did. Now, there are fabulous little mini irons. There are fabulous mini little pressing tables or wool mats that you can have right next to your sewing space so that you don't have to waste a lot of time getting up and going to the ironing board. I feel like my mom would say that it's good to get up and stretch and move around, but sometimes you just don't have time for that. So sewing it all together and pressing it one time, nope, we're going to get rid of that. Here is a much better way to approach it. And I've got my pins here just so I remember what direction. So a couple of things with this. This is what we did with this particular sample. We did 2 things. The first thing is we sewed our fabric, our seams, in different directions. So for this first one, we sewed these 2 fabrics together and we sewed it going in that direction. We went up, we pressed it, we went back to the sewing machine. For the next one, we sewed it going in this direction. So alternate from north to south or east or west or however you want to think about it. You don't want to sew the same direction every single time, because that way you're just asking for something to bow and then you kind of lean into the curve and just keep making a rainbowy quilt. With this one, we had the opportunity to make any corrections that we needed to by alternating our sewing pattern. The other thing we did with this guy is we pressed it. After every single one, we stopped and pressed before we put on the next one. So those are, I'm looking at my little samples over here. I'm going to show you one more thing that's probably going to lead to something else. So that's it. Now, before you even start sewing, there are some things that can help you. The first thing, I'm going to stop that video here. The first thing is to get or use your walking foot. Now, your walking foot, if you are familiar, is basically an attachment that you add to your sewing machine. And you can see right here, it's kind of a big honking thing. If you've seen your walking foot, or if you've gotten a walking foot, what they do is basically you've got your feed dogs on the bottom that are part of your sewing machine, and then this walking foot brings up these two. You can see them circled in this video here, basically walking feet on the top. And what that's going to do is, for your sewing, it's going to move your top fabric and your bottom fabric at the same time. Sometimes, like, presser feet are great, but sometimes you're going to have a little bit of extra resistance on the top than you do on the bottom. And that's going to stretch your top fabric out faster than it's going to stretch your bottom fabric. Now, if you're sewing something small, it probably isn't going to matter at all. If you're sewing something long, or lots of something's long, that could be the difference between an inch or more that you're left over with at the top. Or think of it as you're losing that fabric in the middle, and that's where you get the rainbow, because your fabric is stretched tighter on one side than it is on the bottom. So a walking foot, it's not just for quilting anymore. Consider using it for those big long seams. And you can see, right, we'll wait till it gets to the arrow there, but you can see that the presser feet on the top really helps to move things along. And you can see right where that arrow is, the top feet on your walking foot exactly line up with your feed dogs on the bottom. So that is that guy. The other thing that can help you out is you want to have a very light touch when you are sewing these long seams. Your sewing machine doesn't need a whole lot of work, especially if you've got those good feed dogs and you've got a walking foot. It's got everything that it needs to move that fabric along. All you're doing is guiding it so it can find its home. And there are a couple of things. This is a great opportunity to talk about a promotion with Sew Steady. So Sew Steady are the tables that you can put around your sewing machine. If you've got an inset cabinet, for example, that is fantastic because you got everything the same length. But if you don't, or if you don't have the room, or if you are traveling, consider getting a Sew Steady table. We had a show on that just a little bit ago, but there is a new sale going on. I figured this is the perfect opportunity to let you know about that. With the purchase of a Sew Steady table, you get either your choice of a travel or storage bag, and they're really kind of a cute teal too, to keep it nice and clean and scratch free, along with traveling from retreats, for example. If you can't bring your cabinet, this is a great opportunity to get that bag. It's a $50 value, and you get that for $10. Now, if you aren't much of a traveler, if you aren't much of a stower, I guess is what it would be. You're a sewer, but you're not a stower. You could also get the suspension arms, and suspension arms are especially good if you do a lot of quilting on your machine. The reason Sew Steady tables are so very popular is because you get a nice, big, beautiful, flat surface so that your long pieces of fabric aren't pulling. It's got a nice place for them to rest so that they don't droop either too far to the side or too far in the back. It just keeps that weight centered, so that it's not pulling one way or the other. And that's not only going to help with your tension, but it's going to help with your bowing as well. So it's a great opportunity with the Sew Steady table. We've got a ton of tables, but the one that you're clicking to here is the most popular. It is the Wish one. It's the one that we featured in that show just a few weeks ago. And like I say, it's the most popular. It's got a cute little storage bin that you can put all kinds of fun things in. So great opportunity to pick up some wonderful accessories for super cheap, less than the cost of a spool of thread. And you could get either the bag or the accessory, the suspension arms. And like I say, they help hold the weight of like quilts and really heavy things. So that is it for today's show. I'm going to just check my notes really quickly. We talked about the walking foot. So all that said and done, I hope this gives you the courage. You always have the courage. Who am I kidding? I hope this gives you the tools that you need to not be annoyed with long seams. I know sometimes, I don't know if you see them, but when I see them, I'm like, ah, I don't have the energy for this today. But maybe I'm telling you too much about my sewing practice. But I hope this gives you some tips to make beautiful things, to make big, long, beautiful things, and have them be not so daunting. Now, you all have made it all the way to the end. And so let me do just one or two housekeeping things, and then I'll tell you my super secret conspiracy theory about octopus. So we talked about all of the cool things. Speaking of octopus, we do have Tulip Pink's Floral Reef in the house. We do have a number of the bolts that we are completely sold out of. This one, I'm going to tell you guys, it went faster than I thought it would. We were not prepared for how we should have been. We were not prepared for how gorgeous it looks in person. And so if you are looking for this fabric, we are next on the list to get some more of Tulip Pink's Floral Reef in May. So that is just 2 weeks, a week or two away. So that's not going to be too much longer now. But if you do want to be on the list for this, we do have the option to say notify me. So if we're out of something that you want, do click that notify me button and we'll be sure to send you an email once we get it back in stock. Speaking of this beautiful play on a log cabin, our virtual retreat is coming up in October. You've got the early bird discount through June. So if you like things like this, kind of a modern take on the log cabin, you are going to love this retreat. It is a weekend. You join from the privacy and comfort of your own home. We dig into all things log cabin, and you better believe there's going to be cool stuff like this on how to sew big long seams, not just how to make a log cabin. We're going to give you all the things that go along with that. So do consider signing up for our log cabin retreat. The retreat is in October, and like I say, early bird ends in June. Okay, real talk here. You might think that I am weird, but I am thoroughly convinced that an octopus is an alien from another planet. There is no way, if you look at an octopus and what it can do and how smart it is, and it's unlike any other animal on this planet, I'm convinced that it is from another planet. It came down by UFO. I don't know how it got here. I just know that it is an alien from another planet. So think on it. Maybe you could see where I'm coming from on that, but that is my crazy conspiracy theory about octopuses. So in any event, we've got Katie. I am so sorry. We do comment to people in the chat. Sometimes in the show, I get a lot going on and there's a lot of talking going on. But we absolutely do love your comments and we love your chats. So it is so great to see you, Katie. We are glad. But if there's ever any question, generally I'll do my best after the show to answer those questions. But if I missed one of yours, I am so sorry. I'll read back through it and see what we can do. But hello to you, Katie. Hello to everyone who commented. And Barbara, I saw that you are saying hello from Southern California in that. And I tell you what, we are getting a little bit of that Southern California weather here in Minnesota. So it's been a great day with a great quilt and a great fabric. So thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel. That's Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on Live with Gotham Quilts. Or if you are watching us on the replay, be sure to say hello. We would love to have you whenever you're there. If you haven't yet, do consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. We love to see our subscribers, and it just gets you back into the Gotham fold, so you get to see all the fun stuff that we are doing and posting, not just lives anymore, but we're getting out there. So thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next Tuesday, if not before, and I really hope before.